Wednesday on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day in a busy week. If you missed it, did a post-game podcast Tuesday from the Twins win over Toronto. Haven't said that for about 19 years, since 2004 in the postseason, but they won, snapping that 18-game playoff losing streak. Go listen to that, please. Again, these post-game podcasts from these games, I'm going to do them from every game in the postseason. At least that's the plan right now as far as they go, which, yes, I understand, especially after a Game 1 win, that could take us a great deal into future. At least will take us for 2 more games at the bare minimum. These all have a short shelf life, right? They play again at 3:30 today, so go listen to that right now and check that out. Lavelle Eneal III joined me after the game to break things down, and Chris Hannell, the Twins fan who put together that excellent documentary on the 18-game losing streak, he joined me again to explain fully the catharsis of the streak being broken. Today, I've got a couple more Twins thoughts in just a second here. I've also got some Bally Sports North, Diamond Sports updates, some good reporting in Sports Business Journal that I want to get to, some Aaron Rodgers stuff. I can't get away from him. And Randy Johnson on Gopher football here in a little while. Michigan coming to town this weekend. What a weekend, by the way, for sports. First, though, what I missed, like I said, just a couple extra lingering Twins thoughts that I didn't get to last night with Lavelle, and it kind of boils down to this. It was a breaking of the streak, but more than just that, it was an understanding that this team that Derek Falvey and Thad Levine have assembled was better equipped to break a postseason streak than a lot of the Twins teams that preceded them and accumulated that streak. And what I mean by that is they have a lineup that hits home runs. They don't have one single great home run hitter. They didn't even have anybody individually that got to 25 this year, but they've got like a dozen guys who had double figures, and that led the league. They had 233 home runs. They led the league, tied for the American League lead with Texas in home runs. So they are built to hit for power, and they are built with the pitching staff that strikes out hitters. The most strikeouts in baseball. That is such a difference, a dramatic difference from years past when they had the pitch to contact kind of mentality that worked well during the regular season against the not so great teams. But in the playoffs, you have to be able to strike out the better hitters. You have to be able to get those out without the ball being put in play. And so we saw some of that in this game with Pablo Lopez having a few strikeouts, Griffin Jacks with some key strikeouts in the 8th inning, and then Joan Duran also finishing things off with strikeouts. So that, to me, is the biggest difference, that this team is assembled in a way that they can win in the postseason. And to me, it was kind of a victory lap day for Derek Falvey and Thad Levine. You had, obviously, Pablo Lopez pitching 5 2/3 innings, 1 run. That was obviously the controversial, to a degree, trade early in the season. Luis Arraez going to the Marlins, helping the Marlins. The Marlins are in the playoffs, too. Luis Arraez 1 for 4 with a single. Marlins lose 4-1 in their playoff opener against the Phillies. Small sample size, just 1 game. Luis Arraez is a tremendous hitter. I think both teams benefited from that trade, but you saw all year, especially in the second half of the year, what the Twins saw in Pablo Lopez, and you especially see it in Game 1 of a playoff series where he goes relatively deep, especially for the playoffs, pitches into the 6th inning, almost gets through 6 full, and is able to be effective enough that they win the game 3-1. So you see that, and all 3 runs accounted for by Royce Lewis, 2 home runs, the first overall pick in the first draft that Falvey and Levine presided over, a draft where there was no sure thing. There was 4 or 5 really good prospects at the top. There was a big debate. Hunter Green, Brendan McKay, guys like that. They end up going with Royce Lewis. He has those tough injury moments throughout the start of his career, and even this season comes right back from the injured list, hits 2 home runs in kind of a storybook start to his playoff career and end to the Twins' postseason streak. So just strikes me that was kind of a victory lap kind of day for the way the Twins are building this and the way that Derek Falvey and Thad Levine have tried to assemble this roster. Now, final thought before I get to some other stuff, and again, there'll be another post-game podcast again here later today, so I don't want to clog this up with too much Twins content. Got to get to some other stuff, but the one thing that does concern me in Game 2 and beyond is on Tuesday, in the biggest moments, it seemed like the ball found the gloves of the Twins' best defensive players, Carlos Correa and Michael A. Taylor. Those are two of their best defensive players, hands down, in the lineup. Taylor making some excellent catches, including the one in the 6th inning that prevented runs from scoring, and a diving catch, I believe, early in the game as well. Correa making that run-saving play after the ball eluded Jorge Polanco at third base on that slow roller. So it found the gloves of the guys you wanted it to. It didn't find the gloves of some of the other guys in some of the other situations, but those were lesser situations. Polanco started the game with an error, but Lopez is able to pitch around it. Misplays that other slow roller, that kind of do-or-die play, but doesn't even knock it down. Edouard Julien, I was battling on Twitter with somebody yesterday about his defensive capabilities. I concede that he has gotten better. I still think he is a slightly below average second baseman at best. If the Twins had it their way, he would be the DH, but because Royce Lewis has to be the DH because of his hamstring, you've got Polanco playing out of position at third, you've got Julien at second. Seems like it weakens two spots. I don't think Polanco is a great defensive second baseman, but he is better there, certainly, than he is at third base, and I think I'd still rather have him there than Julien, especially experience-wise and otherwise. Lewis a better third baseman than Polanco, so they've got some holes defensively right now when you look at that defensive lineup. So I'm a little concerned about that. Will the ball continue to find the gloves you want it to find when it matters most? And that is something I want to watch for in Game 2 and beyond. But they send Sonny Gray to the mound. They've got to be feeling great. I don't know about the emotional hangover from what Lavelle said. It sounded like the Twins took a very business-as-usual approach to the game. They're not treating this like Game 7 of the World Series, even though a lot of fans might have been at one moment just because of the breaking of the streak. So I think they're in the right emotional state, but we'll find out more on Wednesday. I promised an update on Bally Sports North and Diamond Sports. Here it is from Sports Business Journal, just kind of tidying up some of the reporting that was in the New York Post last week, basically saying some of it was accurate, but some of it maybe wasn't quite the whole truth. One big thing right at the top of the Sports Business Journal report is that Diamond Sports has asked its creditors, asked the bankruptcy court for an extension on its reorganization plan. That extension they've asked for, which they'll find out soon if they get, that would go to late November. It's basically a 60-day extension that they're asking for. So a deadline came and went, but they've asked for an extension. So that kind of pushes things down the road. Another thing that pushes things down the road is it sounds like they don't have a deal in place yet with Comcast. There was this notion that maybe they'd signed a 1-year extension. That, in reality, is more of an informal agreement to keep talking and to push things down the road. Comcast maybe doesn't want to lock into anything until they know what's going to happen with the creditors in this reorganization. So that has been pushed, it sounds like, into February, which is also when Charter is up. The Charter contract ends at the end of February. That's another big one to watch. DirecTV, according to this report, they didn't so much extend a contract as that contract goes to next fall, but DirecTV declined to exercise an opt-out clause that would have been triggered at the end of this month. So DirecTV is locked in essentially till next fall. Comcast and Charter much shorter term, and what that means is it still feels like, this is on a very kind of short-term basis, but maybe this can has been kicked down the road a few months if we're talking about bankruptcy court, maybe not ruling until, probably early 2024. These major cable carriers not having any kind of major news until early, like February 2024. So that's something to watch. Feels like it will be status quo, at least in the very short term. And it sounds like the report that NBA and NHL would be interested or at least agreeable to taking a pay cut from Diamond Sports in this reorganization. Sports Business Journal clarified that those negotiations would have to be on a team-by-team basis, not a league-wide basis, and that's a lot of teams to negotiate with. Remember, Diamond Sports carries 15 NBA teams and 12 NHL teams, so it's roughly half of the league in both of those cases. So that would be an interesting thing to see. Would certain teams get dropped? Would some of the percentages be less than others, more than others, based on how valuable those contracts are? Obviously, the Wild and Wolves are on both of those, are both on Bally Sports North. It would seem at the very least like this means the start of the year and, the first few months of the season will be relatively status quo. If I had to guess, October, November, December, as long as they get this extension and as long as the creditors then would have more time to decide if they want to accept that plan. We're talking about the first 3 or 4 months sounding like there will be kind of more of the same, and that the real firm deadlines, the real action will be early 2024, and that's when we could start to see things fly, and that's when we could really see some decisions for these NBA and NHL teams, and then quickly, right on the heels of that, Major League Baseball teams as well.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Let's talk Gopher football with Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune. He joins me pretty much every week. And Randy, we're talking about a win rather than a loss for the first time in a few weeks. They did snap that 2-game losing streak, beat Louisiana 35-24 last week. How do they feel after that game? I mean, they were trailing at halftime, but they had to feel pretty good about at least the way they finished and some of the things they were able to get going in the run game, especially without Darius Taylor.
Yeah, I think they felt pretty good about the way they played in the second half. They controlled the ball. They ran it very well. They were efficient in the passing. They had the defense turned it up pretty good too after struggling a bit in the first half. They basically had a shutout until like the last 3 minutes. There's a missed tackle and the guy running back pops it out for a 52-yard run for a touchdown. But overall, they felt pretty good. Yeah, that'll happen after, they had to figure out a way to, get mentally stronger after the way they collapsed in the fourth quarter at Northwestern. So I think they feel that they accomplished that.
What do you think of the caliber of Louisiana was? I mean, it feels like it was not a team that was just a complete pushover, maybe compared to maybe like a Northwestern. Are they kind of a similar talent level and skill level at this point, or are they even lower than that?
No, I would say that and maybe a little bit better. They're probably one of the top 2 teams in the Sun Belt, which that usually produces a pretty good high team at the top end of it. That you go back to 2019, Georgia Southern comes in here and gave that 11-win Gophers team all they could handle. Gophers had to pull it out with a long drive in the last minute to win it. Sun Belt, they got some athletes. That quarterback, he gave them a lot of fits in the first half with his running ability. They were able to close up the lanes a lot better in the second half and held them, I believe it was 7 yards on the ground in the second half.
Speaking of quarterbacks, it was Ethan Kaliakmanis was pretty efficient for a second game in a row. Are we seeing the Gophers kind of settle in now to what they hope they can expect from him? Or, when we spin it forward to Michigan here in a minute and, that excellent team they face this week at Huntington Bank Stadium, is there still now this moment where he's going to have to do even more and he'll be asked to do even more?
Yeah, I think he'll be asked to do a lot more. What he was able to do the last 2 weeks was be very efficient. That helped quite a bit. He had the one interception. That might be one that they don't want to get him in that situation against Michigan. But the way Michigan plays defense, you're going to have to be able to pass against them because they're a very tough team to run against.
Confidence-wise, then, they at least got some of that back. But, I mean, Michigan's a tall order, even if you're playing at your best. Even if this was, a Gophers team of a little bit more experience, of a little bit more of a known commodity, maybe of the last couple of years. Like, this Michigan team's awfully good. Are they ranked number 2 still? I mean, they bring in McCarthy, who is a likely first-round pick. So this could be the second time this year, Randy, that we're looking at a guy that Vikings fans are like, hey, this guy might look good in purple next year. How do you imagine they start to try to figure out how to not only stop but gain yards and score against this Michigan team?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. First of all, stopping Michigan, that's going to be pretty tough. They obviously got a really good running back in Blake Corum, who's tied for the national lead in touchdowns with 9. McCarthy, very efficient, 12 of 16 last week for 156 and 2 touchdowns at Nebraska, plus a rushing touchdown. So he's a lot like Drake May in that manner, where he can get you with his feet too. That's not going to be an easy task. As for Michigan's defense, they've given up 30 points all year in 5 games, 6 points a game. The stat that really I thought was impressive. Opponents have had only 8 trips to the red zone against them this year so far, and have scored 2 field goals and 1 touchdown when they've gotten there. So they just don't give up much.
Why show up then? Geez, I mean, this feels like it's a daunting task. I mean, man, I know I'm being silly here. Of course, they're going to show up and play the game, and maybe, you get big plays or you get turnovers, you get, a surprising ability to move the ball. It can be your day, but that's got to be pretty daunting to go up against a team like that that's yielding so little, especially when you haven't felt like you're getting completely on track yourself this year.
Yeah, I just listening to PJ Fleck on his radio show today. It's just, he tells me you just got to play the best game you can, play at your best, and then to see what happens. Maybe you get a turnover, stuff like that. The one bit of interesting coincidence is that the last time that the Gophers and Michigan played, when Michigan was ranked number 2 in the country, it was in 1986, and that was a 20-17 Gophers win in the Big House. So if you're into that type of coincidence repeating itself, we'll see. But yeah, it's you play them, you see what happens. If, they're around 19 and a half, 20-point underdogs, so you'll see what happens. It's you just got to go play.
And that was a Chip Lohmiller field goal, right?
Yes, it was, as time expired.
Strangely enough, I have this memory. I was, back in the old days of Page 2, this is probably the mid-2000s, when the Gophers were playing Michigan. I was with Chip Lohmiller because I was going to write something about him being a high school coach. Now, I was up in Pequot Lakes, I think is where he was. And it happened to be that when I met up with him, the Gophers-Michigan game was on, and we were talking about that last game. And that was a game they won, I believe, on a last-second field goal again in 2005. So it was amazing to be there.
Gary Russell's big run there.
Yes, Gary Russell's big run and set up. I can't remember who the kicker was at that point, but anyway, that does tell you that the wins over Michigan are few and far between. It hasn't really mattered who the coaches are, who the quarterbacks are. Michigan is one of those blue blood programs in the Big Ten that when they are on the schedule, it's going to be tough to beat them. That said, Randy, it does feel like the way you described what PJ Fleck said on his radio show this week, that, hey, we're just going to show up and play the best game we can. I'm a little bit disappointed that in year 7 of PJ Fleck, that's the mentality. I get that this is a really good version of a really good program, but I don't think that's how Wisconsin or Iowa or, some of the teams that you might aspire to be probably approaches Michigan, unless I'm wrong about that.
When I listened to that, I basically he was saying they have to play their best.
Okay.
So it's a situation where, you're going to need that best effort if you're going to have a chance. I don't feel he was poo-pooing their chances, but he did acknowledge how good Michigan is, and that's pretty obvious. They're not giving up much of anything to anybody.
And now we're getting to the portion of their schedule where you realize what the margin for error was and what the margin for error lost was when they couldn't finish off that Northwestern game. You still got Michigan on the schedule. You've got Ohio State later in the year, and that's at Ohio State, right? I mean, those are 2 games where at the start of the year, you looked at it, you're like, it's going to be tough to win those. You got to kind of take care of business everywhere else. And even if they are able to do that, and I don't know if we have evidence yet that they are that team that they can beat Wisconsin and or Iowa this year, but there's a lot of daunting games left on the schedule. They're through the part of the schedule where you say, okay, North Carolina notwithstanding, they should be able to run the table through that portion of the schedule. And they had, of course, the narrow win over Nebraska that could easily have been a loss, but wasn't. And then the loss to Northwestern that was disappointing. The Louisiana game was close, but they did win that. I mean, I don't feel like they're firing yet in the way they want to be up against, these last 6 or 7 games they've got.
No, they need to play better than they have. That's clear. You look going in, when you look at things on paper, you look their best chance to win the West would be to, if you put Michigan and Ohio State down as losses, beat Michigan State in the other East-West crossover game, and then run the table in the West. That would put you at 7-2. That would give you a pretty good chance of winning the West. Usually 1 loss or 2 loss wins that division. Last year was an exception. The 3-loss Purdue team won it. Now you lose a Northwestern. To get that back, you're going to have to knock off one of those 2 behemoths. Basically, if you want to get back on schedule, and we've seen that the West is pretty. A lot of parity. Maybe Wisconsin is a little ahead of a lot of teams right now. Iowa just lost their quarterback for the year to a torn ACL, so they might not be quite as powerful. But you see, Purdue just put a hammering on Illinois over the weekend, and that was a little surprising, the margin especially. It's a winnable division. But giving away that Northwestern game, just took their margin of error away.
We've knocked them down, or at least I've knocked them down. Let's build them back up again. What is that perfect game? Well, how can they be competitive with Michigan in this game?
I think it's just they're going to have to force some turnovers. Either that or get something in the return game. They need an explosive play going against Michigan somehow to even things up. I would say, everybody kind of gets tired of the old trestle ball that Fleck likes to use. Run the ball, kill the clock, keep your defense on the sideline. If they can do that, they'll take that against Michigan. If you can limit that their offense, keep them on the sideline if you can. There's just a lot of things would have to go their way. It would start with a running game, and then you would need some pretty efficient passing out of Ethan Kaliak-Manis also.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a good piece of the formula. I mean, aside from winning, there's probably still a chance they can feel better about themselves because they can't really be satisfied with the way they've played so far this year, and so they could probably take even some positives out of this game if they are able to kind of reestablish or find the identity that I think they wanted to have going into the season.
Yeah, that's been elusive. I think we've seen it in bits and pieces. We did see it for good stretches against Northwestern until they collapsed. We saw it in the second half against Louisiana. Eastern Michigan, that was one where they just decided we need to figure out our running game when we're just going to run until the game is over.
Right.
They haven't been consistent, and that's the one thing that they do need to find to get to put the season on a good note, I guess. So
McCarthy, is he going to be a Viking next year?
Oh wow, I don't know. I think depends on what happens with the rest of the Viking season here. Is that what we got out of that they squeaked one out in Carolina? Is that does that start something, or does it show more than the warts that they do have? If they have more warts, they would have a much better chance of getting a quarterback like him.
How good is McCarthy, and how bad are the Vikings? Well, we'll be watching a lot of that this weekend. The Vikings have their own tall task with Patrick Mahomes coming down. It's a fun weekend of football, though. I mean, with both of those games here, even though you can't get much better than the opponents with number 2 Michigan and the defending Super Bowl champs. I mean, these are 2 games. You give both teams at least a chance. I'd say the Vikings a better chance than the Gophers, but both of them are going to give it a go, and it should be a fun weekend of football in tandem with all the baseball happening here. And we'll read.
Mike, is Taylor Swift going to be in the house on Saturday or Sunday?
On Saturday? Is she going to come to the? Is she a Gopher football fan too? Is what I want to know.
I'm very surprised there.
She's been to 2 in a row, but one of them was a Chiefs home game, so that one made a certain amount of sense. The other one was in New York, and that's where she lives already. Does she really want to come to Minneapolis for another NFL game? I mean, maybe. The only thing I can think of is they're enjoying this publicity, they're loving this ride, and nothing the NFL and Taylor Swift love more than publicity. And I believe this is the last game before her movie, her concert footage movie comes out on the 13th. My 9-year-old's very keenly aware of that. So I would say that maybe there's at least another Taylor Swift appearance, and that wouldn't surprise me this weekend.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, though. We'll have it all covered. You'll have the games covered, and I'm sure we will have the Taylor Swift angle and all the Viking stuff covered as well. Randy, appreciate it. We'll talk about this game next week.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike.
Good stuff from Randy, and yes, I would definitely say the Vikings have a much better chance of beating Kansas City this weekend than the Gophers do Michigan. Gophers 19-point underdogs. Vikings just 5-point underdogs against Kansas City, so tells you that they are certainly not the favored team, but 5 points is not insurmountable. Obviously, it means one break for the Vikings. Gophers are going to need like 3 or 4 breaks in that game. Kansas City awfully good, but not playing great so far this season, so we can't count out the Vikings in that game. We'll probably talk more about that. Certainly we'll talk more about that on the Access Vikings podcast coming up later this afternoon. Again, part of a very busy day. If you're not sick of the sound of my voice by the end of this week, you never will be. Speaking of the Chiefs, let's finish with the cooler. The Jets just played the Chiefs, lost, but Zach Wilson played better in that game, but still the Jets losing more than they're winning this season. Aaron Rodgers, of course, a big part of that, injured his Achilles on the 4th play of the season, will not go away, will not accept the notion that A, he's probably not going to play, almost certainly not going to play this season, and B, that nobody really cares what he has to say right now while he works through his rehab. He's on Pat McAfee every week, still insisting that maybe, just maybe, a 39-year-old quarterback can come back from this devastating injury in the same season. There is no way that's going to happen. I'm such a naysayer. Aaron Rodgers would hate me. He said, "This is just my mindset. I believe in the power of intention. I believe in prayer. I believe in your mental status and the power of will. I believe in making room for the miraculous to happen." That's fine. That's great. I love the idea of manifesting. I love the idea of leaving yourself open. But there are timelines. There are doctor-studied, peer-reviewed journals. He's doing his own research again, isn't he? Oh, he's doing his own research again, isn't he? Yes, he is. He's kind of reading up on it, kind of making his own timeline. He said, "I have some things working against me. I'm 39 years old, oldest player in the league." Yeah, I would say that's working against you. "A lot of people have a really hard time coming back from this. However, I haven't really paid any attention to any of that stuff. I just kind of have been making my own protocols and my own timetables." Oh my goodness. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. Aaron Rodgers doing his own research again. Not going to work out great for any of us, but you know what? Maybe he'll come back next season. He'll be healthy. But as for 2023, I think all he's trying to do is keep his seat at the table warm. He does not like the idea of the Jets going out and getting another quarterback, especially a high-profile quarterback, especially one that maybe plays for the Vikings right now. We'll see if any of that becomes a reality, if any of that is a true thing that might happen if these teams go on parallel paths, if the Jets are still good enough at a certain point to think they can make the playoffs, and if the Vikings are bad enough that they think they won't be at the playoff picture by the trade deadline. But for now, I think Aaron Rodgers just trying to stay in the spotlight and trying to keep his seat at the table warm. He can't stand thinking about anybody else coming in here. That will do it for today. Like I said, Access Vikings later, another Twins post-game podcast with Lavelle E. Neal after this later tonight. So busy. Go back and listen to the Game 1 post-game podcast. For now, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again later on.